I hadn't been home in 6 years. Not because I didn't care, not because I was too busy playing war, like Camille always said. I just didn't belong here anymore. And frankly, they'd made it clear they were fine with that. Still, when I got the call that our dad had passed, I booked the flight, requested emergency leave, and packed my uniform. Not to make a statement, just out of respect. The funeral was held at St. Stephen's, same church where we buried my grandfather. I wore my dress blues. I didn't expect applause. I didn't expect warmth. I didn't expect Camille to be waiting at the front steps with a smug look on her face either. But there she was, dressed like a senator's wife, holding court like she ran the damn state. She spotted me immediately. Her eyes narrowed. Then she smiled. I should have known that smile meant something. "Look who decided to show up," she said, loud enough for the nearby crowd to hear. The useless soldier finally made time for her family. End of quote. People laughed. A few looked away. Most just stared, awkward. I felt my jaw lock. I gave her a half nod, the kind you give someone you're legally required to acknowledge at family functions. I could hear someone mutter behind me, "Well, she does look sharp in uniform," like that was the most surprising part of my appearance. My husband Eli squeezed my hand. He didn't say anything. He never does in these moments. We talked about this flight, this day, this exact scenario for hours. He knew Camille would say something. I just didn't expect it to be that fast, that public, or that smug. Inside, the church smelled like furniture polish and dead flowers, the kind of scent you never forget once it's linked to grief. Camille had arranged everything, down to the flower placements and the seating. She had Dad's framed portrait at the altar next to a massive Valor House banner, her nonprofit. "Serving veterans with compassion," it said in gold lettering. The irony didn't hit me until later. The service began. The pastor spoke. Camille got up to deliver her eulogy, wearing this practiced sadness that made people around us wipe their eyes. "Dad always believed in service," she said. "He raised us both to give back, in our own ways. I chose service through community. Others," she glanced toward me, "chose different paths. Subtle. Real subtle." Eli looked at me, silently asking if I was okay. I didn't blink. I knew better than to react. Camille was laying traps with every word. She didn't want to honor Dad. She wanted to remind everyone that I left, that she stayed, that she ran fundraisers and galas while I ducked bullets in desert heat. But I wasn't here to match her. I wasn't here to win. I just needed to sit through the ceremony, make it to the burial, and fly back to Colorado before this place clawed its way under my skin again. Then came the slideshow. Camille had put together a full presentation Dad's life in photos. Him as a boy, him in the Navy, him holding baby Camille, him at award ceremonies, him at Camille's wedding, at her nonprofit galas, her charity dinners, her keynote speeches. Not a single photo of me. Not one. I scanned the crowd. Half the people there didn't even know Dad personally. They were donors, board members, and political contacts. This wasn't a memorial. It was a campaign event with a casket in the center. Eli leaned toward me, whispered, "This isn't right." I didn't answer. I just nodded. The reception was held in the church courtyard. White tents, caterers, live acoustic guitarist. I stood near the punch table, watching Camille pose for photos like it was a wedding. People were eating finger sandwiches, while the casket hadn't even been lowered yet. One of Dad's old Navy friends approached me. He looked around before leaning in. "He told me once," the man said, voice low, "if anything happened to him, you'd know what to do." I stared at him. "What do you mean?" He shrugged. He said you were the only one who'd understand." Then he walked away. That was when I felt it. That weight in my chest, that twist in my gut, the thing I'd felt in combat right before something exploded. I looked at Camille again. She was laughing, shaking hands with some defense contractor I vaguely recognized from a VA panel. Her hand rested lightly on his arm, her eyes wide, warm, fake. I turned to Eli and said quietly, "It's happening." He didn't ask what I meant. He just nodded. We slipped out the side gate, past the caterers and the valet stand. In the car, I pulled out my phone, opened my secure line, and dialed one number. I didn't even look at Eli. I just listened to the ring, waiting. My jaw clenched, my hand stopped shaking. Confirm identity, the voice said on the other end. Lieutenant Commander Madeline Rowe, I replied. Ghost protocol. Initiate trace. I ended the call. Eli drove. Neither of us said a word. We didn't need to. I kept my eyes on the road while Eli drove, but my mind was still in that courtyard, her laugh echoing, that man's words looping in my head like a threat disguised as a riddle. If Dad had left something behind, I needed to find it now, not after some lawyer locked it up for official review. We pulled into the motel off County Road 12 just before sunset. Cheap, dusty, and quiet, the kind of place no one looks for anyone. I dropped my go bag on the bed, kicked off my shoes, and opened my laptop. The secure comms line was still active, but no alerts yet. That was good. No movement meant no leak. Want food? Eli asked. Number I want answers. He didn't argue, just handed me a folder from his backpack. This came in this morning. Certified mail. Your dad's estate attorney sent it to the old Colorado address. I forwarded it here. I took it, hands suddenly heavy. The envelope was navy blue. Embossed return address. Stevens, Morris, and Locke. Estate law. I tore it open and found a single page inside, hand, written in Dad's unmistakable, sharp, blocky script. Maddie, if this letter reaches you, it means I've either finally pissed off the wrong people or Camille got tired of waiting for me to die naturally. There's a safe in my midtown apartment. You know, the one-room 204, keys in your old field jacket, codes your OCS graduation date. If I'm gone, don't trust the ceremony. Look for the money trail. And if Camille tries to wrap this all in a Valor House flag, you'll know what that means. Start with her third quarter filings. They never matched up. You were always the quiet one, but you always had teeth. Love, Dad. I read it twice, then once more out loud. Eli leaned on the dresser, arms folded. He really wrote that? I held it up. Recognize the handwriting? Yeah, same one that used to write you notes when you deployed. Jesus. Mine it. He didn't need to say more. My dad was a lot of things complicated. Stubborn, ex-military to the bone, but paranoid wasn't one of them. If he thought Camille was dangerous, it wasn't because he was imagining things. It was because he'd seen something I hadn't. I grabbed my jacket. Sure enough, inside the chest pocket was a small silver key I hadn't noticed in years. It jingled like it had been waiting. We drove into Midtown before sunrise the next day. Dad's apartment was more like a second life. He'd kept it hidden, no one in the family talked about it, probably because they didn't know. The building was old, brick-faced, no cameras in the hallway. Unit 204 looked exactly how I remembered. Plain beige door, worn numbers, brass lock. I slid the key in. It clicked open. Inside was the smell of dust, old coffee, and something faintly medicinal. The place hadn't been touched in weeks. But it wasn't abandoned, just paused. The safe was in the closet. I entered the code, my OCS graduation date, just like he said, and heard the bolt slide back. Inside, a hard drive, a brown leather notebook, 2 printed financial reports from Valor House, and a burner phone. I sat on the floor, legs crossed like I was back in a war zone trying to decrypt something under pressure. Eli crouched beside me. The notebook had Dad's notes on internal transfers from Valor House, red flags marked in pen. The financial reports were quarterly filings, but they didn't match public disclosures. Money was being shifted between dummy accounts, labeled as medical equipment grants and rehabilitation tech. The amounts were wrong. The dates were off. The recipients were nothing. Empty names, entities that didn't exist. This is laundering, I muttered. Eli nodded. And not amateur level. The burner phone had only 3 numbers saved. One was marked LTG S. Brooks. One was Keller. The third had no name, just numbers. All 3 had outgoing calls from 6 weeks ago, right around when Dad died. The voicemail on the phone was intact. One message. Dad's voice. If anything happens to me before I finish this. Maddie, you were right not to trust how fast Camille scaled Valor House. I didn't want to believe it. She's not just moving money. She's moving assets. Real ones. Tech. Military adjacent. And I think she's using the rehab programs to move them overseas. Don't talk to anyone you don't know personally. And don't trust local law enforcement. This goes deeper than just charity fraud. I exhaled, long and slow. My hands were shaking again, but not from fear, from clarity. Camille wasn't just profiting off the uniform, she was trading in it, hiding behind the very flag she used to accuse me of dishonoring. I scanned the rest of the room. Bookshelves, old uniforms, faded family photos, but one caught my eye. A photo of me and Camille, age 7 and 10. I was in a toy helmet. She was in a princess dress. Both of us grinning, arms around each other. It had been framed and placed next to a folded flag. I picked it up. I don't know why. Maybe because I needed to remember who she used to be or who I used to think she was. "Is this what you meant, Dad?" I said out loud. "Is this where it starts?" I set the photo down and reached for the hard drive. I spent the next 4 hours dissecting that hard drive. No encryption, no password, just folders nested inside folders, labeled with clinical precision. Audit Q3, VA bids, Wellman Foundation contacts, and personal Camille. Her name sat there like a warning. I opened it anyway. Photos, emails, receipts. It was a curated collection of Camille's life, or at least the part Dad had access to, a digital scrapbook of red flags. One email stood out. From Camille to a man named Evan Wellman. The timestamp was from 5 months before Dad's death. Evan, if the Pentagon contract goes through, Valor House gets the first shipment. Make sure the invoices match the recovery center's itemized needs. No slip-ups. Any audit triggers, we both go under. See, she had written it like someone who wasn't afraid of getting caught. Like someone who knew no one would dare check. Eli stood behind me, sipping bad motel coffee. "Wellman? Isn't that the guy from the memorial? The one with the weird smile?" I nodded. Defense logistics consultant. Works adjacent to the DoD. Does a lot of work with non-profit subcontractors. Which is just the classiest way to say legal money launderer. Exactly. Publicly, Camille was still perfect. Her website was filled with professional photos, her speaking at podiums, hugging veterans in wheelchairs, cutting ribbons in front of clinics with senators. Her pinned post on Valor House's homepage read, "Healing starts at home." She was being nominated for a National Service Medal. I knew this because it was in the draft emails she'd been coaching her PR firm on how to spin her bio for maximum public empathy without leaning too hard on military ties. The wording was clinical, strategic. She even deleted phrases like, "My father's service inspired me," replacing them with, "My father's legacy continues through my work." She'd surgically removed Dad's name from her narrative while turning his connections into her launch pad. Eli sat down across from me and tilted his head. "You okay?" "I'm thinking about how long she's been running this play," I said, "and how no one noticed." "People noticed," he said. "They just didn't care. She makes donors feel good. Veterans get lip service. Politicians get photos. It's a machine. She's just the smiling face taped to the front of it." Oib. And now that smiling face was a suspect. I opened another folder labeled Sponsorships. A spreadsheet cataloged every donor to Valor House over the past 3 years. I expected the usual: corporate sponsors, defense contractors, the occasional celebrity, but one name caught my attention. Ramtech Dynamics. A known player in military biotech. Banned from direct government contracts 5 years ago after a whistleblower leak exposed substandard products being funneled to VA hospitals. Yet here they were donating $500,000 to Camille's nonprofit. No press release, no mention in annual reports, just a quiet equipment partnership buried in the appendices. I called it what it was: front door laundering. Ramtech couldn't sell to the Pentagon, so they sold through Camille. She donated their gear to VA centers as charitable gifts. And they, in turn, paid her under the table with consulting fees masked as speaker honorariums, travel stipends, and gala sponsorships. I leaned back and looked at Eli. "You know what pisses me off the most?" He raised an eyebrow. She used Dad's face, his reputation, to pull this off. Every time she wanted credibility, she pointed to him. The decorated Navy commander with a disabled daughter still serving. That was her pitch. Eli nodded slowly. And it worked. She wasn't just perfect. She was untouchable. Wrapped in flag-waving PR, praised in local news cycles, loved by donors who wanted tax write-offs and moral high ground. Nobody questions the woman who gives a vet a home, even if the drywall's rotting and the check's been cashed twice. I pulled up her last public appearance, a YouTube interview from a month before Dad died, She sat in front of an American flag, smiling, voice soft but firm. We don't just honor veterans, we elevate them. We give them the resources they were promised but never received. We fill the gaps left by a broken system, and we do it with dignity. The comments section was filled with hearts and praise and hashtags. The algorithm loved her. I stared at her face on the screen. The same woman who'd laughed in mine 24 hours ago. The same one who erased me from Dad's memorial slideshow like I'd died years ago. You wanted to know if I was okay? I said to Eli. He nodded. I closed the laptop. I am now. I rechecked the safe twice before we left, just to be sure I hadn't missed anything. I even lifted the carpet and tapped on the walls. Nothing else. But my gut said this place wasn't just a safe house. It was a vault, a message, a map, and it was pointing me somewhere deeper. On the way back to the motel, Eli stopped at a diner to grab coffee. I stayed in the car, flipping through Dad's leather notebook. His handwriting zigzagged between military shorthand, accounting notes, and what looked like code phrases. Some pages were clean, others had entire sentences blacked out with thick marker. One section was labeled, Camille Pressure Points. Under it were bullet points. Panic around audits. Dubai account check Catrith quarter flow. Dr. L equals weak link. Don't trust her when she's kind. That last line hit harder than it should have. Back at the motel, I scanned the hard drive and pulled up a folder of building leases. That's when I saw a rental agreement signed by Dad 6 months ago for another property, not the Midtown apartment. This one was in Westtown, across from a warehouse district. Under his alias, paid in full for a year. I looked at Eli. He had another place. Think she knew about this one? Number. That's why we're going. It took us 40 minutes to get there. The building was older than it looked, red brick with a locked gate and a keypad entry. I guessed the code on the second try. 1959 Dad's commissioning year. We stepped into a narrow hallway, stale with mildew and dust. No cameras. Second floor. Unit 208. This door had 2 locks. The key from my jacket opened the top one. The bottom was digital. I stared at it for a second, then entered Camille's birthday. Wrong. I tried Dad's Navy badge number. Wrong again. I tried the first 4 digits of his social security, something he used for everything he thought no one would guess. Click. The apartment was small, just 2 rooms. But it was clean. Set up. Like someone had been living there recently, but left in a hurry. No dust. No dishes in the sink. A military-style cot in the corner, folding table with neatly stacked documents, a locked file cabinet, and a portable scanner still plugged in. He hadn't abandoned this place. He'd been working here. Eli checked the closet while I flipped through the paperwork. Half of it was printed emails, some from Camille, others from Valor House staff. There were budget documents marked in red ink. Totals didn't match revenue reports. He'd written notes in the margins. Where did the $420 Kelvin go? This doesn't exist in VA records. Why did she lie about Boston facility opening date? There was a USB stick taped to the back of a filing drawer. I pocketed it. Next to the scanner was a notebook filled with contact names. Half of them had been scratched out. One was circled twice. Dr. Lucinda Hurst, Physical Rehab, Boston VA Center. Recognize that name? Eli asked from the doorway. She's Valor House's medical advisor. She runs their rehab consulting for wounded vets, supposedly. You think she's legit? I think she's a liability Camille's trying to keep quiet. I kept scanning. In the corner was a small corkboard with pinned receipts, post-its, and a photo of a shipping container marked with a blue triangle logo. That same logo appeared on several of the invoices labeled as assistive mobility units. Except they weren't mobility units, they were crates. The labels didn't match actual medical supply codes. I knew because I'd worked logistics during my second deployment. Nothing about this said wheelchair parts. That. Eli ran a search on his tablet and pulled up an old customs violation report. That logo, Blue Track Logistics, had once been flagged for misdeclared industrial payloads on shipments bound for Southeast Europe. It was one of those companies that changed names every fiscal quarter. I felt something in my chest twist again. Not fear. Pattern recognition. She's moving something bigger than money, I said. And she's hiding it behind vet care, sympathy, and nonprofit loopholes. Arms? Ely asked. Not full weapons, but components maybe. Military-grade electronics, hard-to-track tech, dual-use stuff. We both went silent for a moment. Then I opened the last drawer of the file cabinet and pulled out a sealed envelope. Inside was a single printed document, Dad's death certificate. But this one was different from the one Camille had emailed the family. Different date filed, different certifying physician, and a note stapled to it in Dad's handwriting. They forged this version. I held it like it was made of glass. He'd known. He'd seen it coming. Not just the betrayal, not just the fraud, but something worse. Someone had tampered with the official record of his death, maybe to avoid an autopsy, maybe to prevent questions. But it was done with purpose. I sat back against the wall and stared at the piles around me. This wasn't just about money anymore. This wasn't just Camille siphoning off donor cash and selling herself as America's sweetheart. It was a system. And Dad had spent the last year of his life trying to crack it open with nothing but notebooks, receipts, and his own name as leverage. I didn't say anything on the drive back. I just watched the lines on the road blur past and let my brain run the logistics like a combat op. Camille wasn't laundering money. She was moving government-adjacent technology through a tax-exempt pipeline while smiling for press photos and shaking hands with senators. And everyone around her had bought it because she dressed it in American flags and trauma recovery narratives. Back at the motel, Eli pulled the blinds closed and plugged in the USB we'd found. It contained exactly 4 folders, each named by quarter. Inside, fake invoices, manipulated donation logs, warehouse routing orders, and one contract template, unsigned, but clearly ready for something called Adaptive Kinetic Response Units. I stared at that one. "ACRUs?" I muttered. "That's not real tech, not by that name." "It is," Eli said. "Just not for civilians. Those were experimental rigs for spinal rehab patients with combat injuries. Half of them were decommissioned for overheating issues." I looked at him. "You're saying she's selling broken prototypes? Or shipping them out the back door so someone else can reverse engineer them?" I rubbed my eyes. "She's using injured veterans as a smokescreen." We kept digging. I traced one route log labeled Boston to Norfolk to Ajaccio. Ajaccio was in Corsica, not exactly a hotbed of VA activity, but a known port for rerouted NATO tech when governments want deniability. Another invoice showed a shipment labeled Mobility Aid Crates, 14 units, recipient, Valor House Kosovo Program. There was no Kosovo program, not in any brochure, press release, or IRS filing. But the warehouse address matched one Dad had circled in his notes. She wasn't hiding these operations with precision. She was just betting no one cared enough to look. The deeper I went, the more familiar it felt. This wasn't new to me. I'd seen this setup before Afghanistan, 2012. A nonprofit out of Nevada funneling drone parts through disaster relief channels. We'd caught the operation because some kid forgot to switch barcodes on a container. That kid spent 8 years in federal prison. The founders? They gave a TED Talk on veteran tech innovation. Camille was smarter. She didn't operate on military bases. She worked the civilian edges. She built Valor House to look unthreatening: soft colors, emotional language, testimonials from amputees. Everything designed to make auditors uncomfortable with asking hard questions. She'd built the perfect front. I opened the Q3 folder. There it was again: Ramtech Dynamics. This time, under a shell company named Cariswell Medical. It donated $320,000 worth of neuro response units to Valor House. Except the contract showed no physical transfer. Just line items and a thank you receipt with Camille's e-signature. Follow the parts, follow the paper, follow the silence. That's when I noticed the pattern. Every time Camille announced a new program launch, usually rehab centers in low-visibility towns, there was a spike in warehouse activity. Packages would go in, then out again within 72 hours. Same routes, same containers, different paperwork. By the time anyone could follow the trail, it was all legally laundered through international humanitarian logistics partnerships. She wasn't just helping veterans. She was helping herself to international defense systems using non-profit status and emotional blackmail as cover. I pulled up the Valor House annual reports and ran them through a simple consistency checker. The numbers didn't match up. Donor money was being spent, but not where they claimed. Rehab centers listed in brochures didn't exist. Their supposed staff couldn't be found on LinkedIn. in state license databases, or through VA employment records. Fake facilities, fake doctors, fake recovery programs. Only the veteran faces were real cherry-picked, heavily edited, and used for marketing. The actual help they got? Minimal at best. Some never even received follow-up care. One man's image had been reused in 3 separate regions, labeled as 3 different people. Eli stared at the screen. She turned the system into a storefront, and no one blinked. I picked up Dad's notebook again, flipped to the page where he'd written, "Valor House isn't broken. It's designed this way, efficient, controlled, marketable." He'd understood it long before I did, and he'd tried to fix it from the inside. That was his mistake. Camille didn't build Valor House to serve. She built it to shield herself. We found one more file. A draft letter from Dad to a Department of Defense liaison. "I believe Valor House is being used to bypass tech export restrictions through rehabilitation centers acting as distribution hubs. My daughter Camille Rowe is central to this operation. I take no pleasure in reporting this, but national security is being compromised under the mask of charity. If you need corroboration, contact me immediately." The letter was never sent. It was dated 2 weeks before he died. The next morning, I stood under a motel shower that groaned like it hadn't been used since the Bush administration, trying to figure out when exactly I'd stopped looking at my sister-like family and started seeing her as a hostile actor. Somewhere between the fake invoices and the dead veterans in her brochures, the line had vanished. I dried off, sat at the edge of the bed, and pulled open the field journal I hadn't touched in years. I used to keep mission notes, quick reflections, tactical breakdowns, mental check-ins. But this wasn't combat anymore. Not in the way I'd trained for. This was a war with no battlefield and no clear rules of engagement. "You're quiet," Eli said, pouring stale coffee into a paper cup. "I'm thinking about Lima 6. His eyes met mine, and I could tell he knew exactly what I meant. "The aid station?" I nodded. It had been a forward operating base in Kandahar. 2017. Our team got word that an aid convoy was being used to smuggle signal jammers to a local cell. I was on overwatch. We intercepted the convoy, neutralized the threat, and discovered the so-called medical crates were filled with parts meant to take down UAVs mid-flight. The NGO running the convoy? Fully credentialed. Legit on paper. Even had backing from a U.S. grant program. But the head of the operation had cut a deal. For every aid drop, he moved 1 crate of tech to private buyers. He'd wrapped the whole thing in children's medicine and refugee blankets. And no one wanted to touch him. The report got buried, classified as sensitive diplomatic fallout risk. We were ordered to stand down. That was the day I learned the difference between illegal and untouchable. Camille had built the same model. Same architecture. Same fake empathy. She just made it prettier. Instead of a desert and a war zone, she used suburban campuses and patriotic photo ops. She dressed it in red, white, and blue press kits. But it was the same scheme. I stood up and pulled on jeans and a hoodie. I couldn't wear my uniform for what came next. This wasn't official. It wasn't sanctioned. It wasn't even legal, technically. Eli raised an eyebrow. "Where are we going?" "To see someone who taught me how to lie for a living." He knew what that meant. We were heading to Lincoln Park, an old part of town, where cell signals got spotty and people still used burner phones because they liked them, not because they were hiding anything. We parked on a side street and walked 2 blocks past an abandoned clinic, then down a narrow alley that smelled like rust and regret. At the end was a locksmith's shop that hadn't changed in 20 years. I knocked twice, paused, then knocked again. The man who answered looked like he'd been carved out of concrete and nicotine. "Madeline Rowe," he said. "I thought you were dead." "Not yet," I said. He opened the door and let us in. The shop was just a front. The real business was in the back: intel recovery, private audits, the kind of work retired operatives did when pensions weren't enough. His name was Dwayne Hart, ex-NSA. Burned too many bridges to ever go back, but still sharp as hell. "You hear about the Valor stuff?" he asked, sitting behind an ancient desk with 3 locked drawers and 1 working fan. I blinked. "You already heard?" "People talk. Camille's name has been floating in procurement circles for months, mostly whispers. But one guy in Vienna flagged her 3 weeks ago for irregular routing. He went quiet after that. Dead? Missing, Some difference. I handed him the USB. I need to trace all secondary entities. Shell core, foreign transfers, anyone she's paying to keep quiet. He plugged it in without asking questions. This is deep, he muttered. This isn't charity fraud. This is state-adjacent trafficking. Yeah, I said. And I think my dad tried to stop it. Now he's in the ground with a forged death cert. Dwayne didn't flinch, just started typing. You want justice? No, I said. I want confirmation. And then I want containment. He smiled. God, I miss talking to soldiers. How? He typed for 30 more seconds, then paused. You're gonna need more than me. This thing is locked up tighter than Langley's Christmas party. I leaned forward. Then give me someone who's not afraid to blow the doors off. Dwayne didn't give me a name. He gave me a phone number written on the inside of a matchbook from a bar that hadn't existed in over a decade. It was the kind of thing only old intelligence guys did, low-tech, untraceable, almost romantic, if it weren't so deadly. Eli raised an eyebrow as I folded it and slipped it into my wallet. This person gonna help or kill us? Depends how polite I am on the phone. I dialed from a gas station payphone 20 minutes outside town. 4 rings, then a click, silence, then a voice, raspy and calm, like someone reading a newspaper with a gun on the table. What did he give you? Your number. Said you hate locked doors. Who's the target? Camille Rowe, CEO of Valor House. Domestic nonprofit cover, international logistics fraud, potential dual-use tech laundering, possibly tied to a forged death cert, and an internal whistleblower, my father. Pause. Then, I'll call back in 5. No name, no questions. Just the kind of silence that tells you someone's already running your background while you wait. 5 minutes later, my burner rang. You'll receive a link. It expires in 60 seconds. Download and disconnect. The link came through a dummy SMS. We pulled over, parked in a truck stop lot, and opened the file on Eli's laptop. It was a database dump. Internal financial pathways. Shell corporations registered in Delaware, Luxembourg, and the Cayman Islands. Registered agents were aliases, classic layering tactics. Every 10th transaction looped back into Camille's nonprofit, disguised as international partnership grants. She was recycling the money to create the illusion of global reach. And the companies she partnered with? Most didn't even have offices, just mailing addresses tied to drop boxes or temporary rental spaces. Some didn't exist at all. We tracked one trail. Valor House paid $180,000 to Red Point Relief Trust in Berlin. That trust transferred $179,500 to Orion Healthcare Logistics in Malta. From there, $179,000 was paid to Bright Path Advisors, a consulting firm registered to a P.O. box in Miami, which then donated $178,000 back to Valor House, under the name of a first-time donor listed as a veteran widow. Round-tripping, Eli muttered. Money laundering 101. No, I said. This isn't just washing cash. She's building fake legitimacy. She's creating a feedback loop to inflate Valor House's public image while hiding arms components in plain sight. Din. Another transaction showed a payment to Strident Systems, a known subcontractor for military drone components under a grant listed as Neuromuscular Interface Research. I'd seen that phrase before. It was the same language she'd used in a press release about innovative mobility solutions for paralyzed veterans. Except there were no trials, no published studies, no patient records, just language designed to confuse anyone who didn't know what to look for. Dwayne's contact had added red flags throughout the file. UDIN next to suspicious transfers, UDIN next to aliases, with known intel links. One name had 4 red flags. Keller. No first name, just Keller. They appeared on 4 routing chains, usually as a compliance advisor or logistics intermediary. Once as a donor relations coordinator for a foundation that shared an address with a shipping warehouse in Newark. I'd seen that name before. On Dad's burner phone. I pulled it from my duffel bag, checked the logs. There it was. Last outgoing call before his death. Keller. 12 minutes long. Keller could have been the one he was negotiating with, I said. Or threatening. Or being threatened by, Eli added. I stared at the laptop screen. The more I zoomed out, the clearer the picture became. Camille wasn't a CEO. She was the keystone of an entire laundering structure, protected by public goodwill and a carefully built mythology. She didn't just steal government funding. She rebranded it, wrapped it in sympathy, then sent it out the door labeled as healing. And she made sure it looked beautiful. I clicked into one more folder. Event expenses. It was filled with receipts from galas, memorials, and award dinners, catering invoices, security payments, travel accommodations, and one very specific entry. Event. Valor House Memorial Tribute. Arlington Chapter. Location. Presidio Conference Center, Virginia. Date. The 19th of March. Notes. High-level donor gathering. Confirmed. Keller, Ramtech, 3 foreign foundation reps. Ensure security presence is PR-facing only. Madeline not invited. I blinked. The 19th of March was 5 days away. She was doing another deal. Publicly. Using a memorial as a front. Again. This time she'd be surrounded by defense contractors, media, and her entire donor base. And she thought I wouldn't be there. I shut the laptop. Eli didn't say anything. He just reached into the side pocket of his bag and handed me a second phone. "You ready to burn everything down?" he asked. I didn't answer. I dialed a number I hadn't used since active duty. "Authorization code Tango, 5 Romeo Zulu," I said. "Requesting Ghost Protocol clearance." How we know? The voice on the other end didn't ask why I was calling, just asked for a verification phrase. Status blue. Eyes open. No flags. Another pause, then a quiet, "Ghost Protocol authorization confirmed. Proceed." That was it. No paperwork, no chain of command, just a silent green light from a system built for threats that came from inside the house. And Camille? She was about as inside as it got. We booked a new motel, different chain, different part of town, just in case. Eli triple-checked the perimeter while I went back through Dad's files looking for one thing I hadn't yet found. Evidence of who else tried to blow the whistle before him. There had to be someone. A name jumped out from the digital logs. Special Investigator Laura DeSantis, Doe. Her name appeared only once, buried in a list of access permissions, on a restricted PDF file marked DOD, Inquiry Provisional Phase Terminated. I ran her name through the secure line. Status: missing since July. Case closed due to lack of credible leads. Disappeared. I cross-checked that with her last logged travel. She flew to D.C. 3 days before the inquiry was killed. Scheduled to meet with Camille Rowe at Valor House headquarters for what was supposed to be a routine NGO audit alignment discussion. That meeting never happened. According to Camille's assistant, whose email was attached, Laura canceled due to a family emergency. Except she didn't. Her last known location was a gas station 5 miles from the Valor House campus. Her rental car was found 2 weeks later cleaned out, wiped. No prints, no DNA, no security footage. Just an empty vehicle with a folded blazer and a parking ticket under the windshield. I opened the image file of the report. The officer on scene noted, "No signs of foul play." I circled that phrase in red. No signs of foul play is what they write when they're told to write nothing. Eli pulled up the photo of DeSantis. "She looks sharp." "She was," I said. "She used to teach financial counter-surveillance at the academy. She wouldn't have vanished by accident." He leaned back in his chair. "Camille made her disappear?" "Camille, or the machine she's built." I looked back at the PDF. The most important line wasn't in the body of the report. It was in the metadata. Document created by Keller, variant. So Keller wasn't just a compliance advisor. He had access to internal DOJ channels. Maybe he wasn't even his real name, but he had power. Enough to scrub a federal investigator and mark the file closed. I needed to know what DeSantis had found before she vanished. A single link on the file led to an offline storage location, a server registered under a fake nonprofit in Albany. I sent the IP to Dwayne. 2 hours later, he sent me back a decrypted folder titled DS, Field Notes, Unsubmitted. Inside, audio logs, typed summaries, personal notes. Her last entry. Valor House's donor pipeline overlaps with at least 2 foreign agents flagged in the Vienna surveillance reports. Camille Rowe has no direct foreign ties on paper, but her communications are scrubbed through a logistics firm operating out of Norfolk that doesn't actually move freight, it moves metadata. They're bleeding information alongside tech. If I go missing, it's because someone in DC doesn't want this traced to NATO contracts. She was too close, too loud, and too alone. Eli didn't say anything for a while. He just handed me a bottle of water and sat across from me. His look said it all. This wasn't about Camille anymore. Not just her. It was about the system that gave her cover. The silence that followed every red flag. The expensive smiles. The handshakes. The fundraising dinners where every guest wore a flag pin and pretended it meant something. And DeSantis? She was one of us. Not by blood, but by code. You want to pull her file and leak it? Eli asked. No, I said. I want to finish it. The truth wasn't hidden. It was buried in plain sight. And every time someone got close, they got folded into a footnote. Not me. Not this time. I barely blinked before clicking the audio file labeled Row Case, FINAL. It was crackly, probably recorded on an old field mic. DeSantis's voice came through, calm but tense. Source confirmed Rowe's death certificate was altered. Not just misfiled, doctored. Filed 2 days before official time of death. Certifying physician has no affiliation with the hospice listed. The listed medications don't match VA-issued prescriptions. Somebody scrubbed the timeline. I sat still for a long moment. It wasn't a theory anymore. Not a suspicion. Not a gut feeling. It was data. Camille had tampered with our father's death certificate, and she hadn't done it to save time. She'd done it to cover up what really happened. I opened the scanned version of his original hospice intake form, cross-checked it with the fake one Camille had circulated after the funeral. The differences were small but deliberate. Timing, medication dosage, final attending nurse. The real one showed a morphine dosage appropriate for pain management. The altered version? Double. Enough to depress respiratory function in someone already weakened. That's not just a mistake, I said out loud. Eli leaned over. That's a kill dose. I'd been trained to recognize chemical patterns in field operations, what to use for sedation, what to watch for in enemy wounds. The revised chart read like someone had quietly euthanized him and hoped no one would ask questions. Only someone did. There was a note in DeSantis's audio log I hadn't noticed at first. Hospice nurse flagged abnormal vitals to her supervisor, asked for review. She was terminated the next day. Employee record removed from system. I have her name. Lindsay Carver. Currently working private care under alias. I found her through a background trace using a tax ID search. She was working out of Raleigh now. Independent palliative nurse, private hire only. I called. She answered on the third ring. This is Lindsay. Hi. My name is Madeline Rowe. I'm trying to verify something about my father's death, Jonathan Rowe. You were present, weren't you? There was a pause. A long one. Then she said, I shouldn't be talking to you. Hi. Because you signed an NDA? Because people get hurt when they talk. Her voice was low, tired, like someone who'd carried a secret for too long. I don't want you in trouble, I said. But I need to know the truth. Did my sister give him that final injection? Another pause. Then, she was in the room. She stayed late. Everyone else had gone home. That was enough. I didn't need a confession. I didn't need her to say yes out loud. That hesitation told me everything. Thank you, I said. That's all I needed. I hung up and sat in the dark for a while. My mind wasn't racing. It was quiet, focused. This wasn't betrayal anymore. It was premeditated. Camille had taken everything Dad's name, his trust, his body, and turned it into leverage for her operation. When he got too close to pulling the plug, she pulled it first. And no one had questioned her. Not the funeral home. Not the donors. Not the board of directors at Valor House. Because Camille cried at the right times. She hugged people who were hurting. She gave eloquent speeches with just the right tremble in her voice. People saw what they wanted to see. But I knew better. I'd sat across from warlords and insurgents who wore suits and smiled for the camera. I'd watched men sign peace deals with one hand and order executions with the other. Camille fit right in. She'd just played the long game. She waited for the moment when Dad was weakest, when his memory was most convenient, and then silenced him permanently. Eli looked up from his laptop. There's a file here from Camille's internal drive draft letter to Valor House staff. Pre-written condolences. Dated 2 days before your dad's death. Scheduled mourning, I muttered. She didn't even wait to see if it worked. She had the whole post-mortem rollout prepped. Media statements, fundraising updates, even a commemorative plaque design. The body wasn't even cold. I stood up. Not fast, not dramatic, just steady. Eli asked, "What now?" I picked up the folder, the burner phone, and my military ID. "We go to the event. She wants a show? We'll give her one." Eli and I arrived at the Presidio Conference Center before dawn. I knew Camille's taste: overproduced, dramatic, and always designed for maximum camera coverage. Her memorial tributes were never about the fallen. They were branding opportunities. She never missed a chance to position herself as the grieving daughter of a decorated veteran and the benevolent guardian of broken soldiers. This one was no different. There were flags dozens lined along the perimeter like guardrails for patriotism, rows of chairs arranged with military precision, banners printed with Valor House's signature slogan, "Healing with Honor." Somewhere under all that staged empathy was a transaction. I didn't know what she was selling today, but someone was buying it. Security was light, mostly off-duty cops in rented suits, checking guest lists and nodding politely at uniforms. I wore civilian black, hair pinned up. My ribbon bar was in my purse, but I wouldn't need it unless things got noisy. Eli took position near the AV crew. He could blend in as tech support. I kept my distance, waiting for Camille to arrive. And when she did, everything slowed. She stepped out of a sleek black SUV, wrapped in a navy blue coat, sunglasses on even though it was overcast. She was flanked by 2 assistants, and someone I recognized from the donor logs, a rep from Ramtech, shaking her hand like they'd just closed a deal instead of walked into a tribute. She looked like royalty, and everyone around her bowed accordingly. A retired general opened the event, spoke about sacrifice, service, the legacy of Jonathan Rowe. I stood in the back, jaw clenched. They used his photo, not the real one, the one Camille had edited. Clean-shaven, metal-heavy, a version of him she could market, sanitized grief. Then Camille took the podium. She removed her glasses slowly, let the silence sit. She was good at this. Too good. My father always believed in the quiet strength of service. He taught me that duty didn't end with deployment, it continued at home, through care, through love, through healing. And so today, we don't just honor him, we continue his mission. Applause. She swallowed, eyes glistening. He always said I was too soft for the military. Maybe he was right, but I've tried to serve in the way I could with compassion. More applause. Eli's voice crackled in my earpiece. Keller just arrived. 2nd row, gray coat, no lapel pin. He's sitting next to a woman from Luxembourg's Foreign Aid Ministry. "Eyes on him," I said. "Check his exit path." I watched Camille wrap up her speech, then pose for a round of carefully arranged photo ops. She hugged 3 veterans in Valor House jackets. All 3 were part of her video testimonial campaign. The same faces used in every press package. None of them looked like they wanted to be there. I made my way to the refreshment tent, less guarded, easier to slip past. Found the storage area where staging gear and crates were being rotated by staffers. I counted 5 black cases marked with white tape. ACRU 7, the same coded product tags from the fake invoices. I scanned one QR code. It registered as Mobility Assist Frame, donation batch number 2147. But when I accessed the internal tag embedded in the crate, the real manifest read, Gyroscopic Stabilization Rigs, Defense Application, Class 3 clearance required. Eli confirmed from his end. Same over here. These aren't donation units. They're smuggling containers. Mess. They were moving the gear today. Right here. Under a tent with finger sandwiches and veteran choirs singing God Bless America. I stepped out, eyes locked on Camille across the crowd. She was mid-conversation with a state senator, smiling just wide enough to suggest modesty, not ambition. She saw me, and for half a second, she hesitated, just the briefest flicker of annoyance. Then she smiled again and mouthed, "You weren't invited." I walked right up to her. "You said he died peacefully," I said, flat voice, flat eyes. She blinked. "I have his charts, the real ones. Her smile didn't budge. You should leave, Maddie. Not without him. The senator, confused, tried to intervene. Is everything okay? Camille touched his arm gently. Just a family matter. My sister's still adjusting. I leaned closer. I activated Ghost Protocol. They're watching? Listening? You're boxed in. Her eyes sharpened. Her smile froze. You wouldn't, she whispered. I already did. I turned and walked away without waiting for a reaction. I didn't need to. The wheels were already turning. The case was open. The clearance was active. The observers were embedded. 12 minutes. That's all I needed. The moment I stepped out of the refreshment tent, I reached for the second burner phone in my jacket and dialed the number burned into memory since my first deployment. The line clicked. U.S. Northcom, encrypted line. State code. Whiskey Lima 09er. Confirm Ghost Protocol in effect. This is Lieutenant Commander Madeline Rowe, active clearance. Pause. Then, confirmed. Proceed. I moved toward the perimeter where security was lax and found cover behind the media van. I have eyes on a hostile logistics event disguised as a memorial. Location is Presidio Conference Center, Valor House Tribute. Internal evidence confirms arms smuggling via aid crates. I have multiple crates on site. Foreign buyers present. Request immediate extraction team. Code level 3. No press. Verified. Extraction window, 12 minutes. Unit is inbound. I ended the call and pocketed the phone like I'd just ordered lunch. Eli's voice came through my earpiece. What did you do? I told the truth. Loud enough this time. He gave a low whistle. They won't come quiet. Number. But they'll come fast. I scanned the event again. Camille had stepped into the VIP tent with Keller and 3 men I didn't recognize, suits too expensive, faces too clean. Definitely not veterans. One of them handed Camille a slim folder she tucked into her bag without even looking at it. That was the drop. Whatever they were finalizing, it just happened. I walked the edges of the grounds, careful not to attract attention, careful to stay within range of the signal team that was now likely circling above in a blacked-out UH-60. I recognized the hum of rotors miles off. I'd trained with these guys. They weren't going to knock politely. 11 minutes. I passed a group of junior staffers setting up boxed lunches near a Valor House booth. One looked up and recognized me from the funeral. Oh, hi, you're Camille's sister, right? Not anymore, I said, and kept walking. I made my way toward the service entrance behind the stage. From here, I had full view of the VIP tent, the supply crates, and the donor rows. Keller stood with his back to me, gesturing with his hands in tight circles like he was explaining how long they'd need to finish whatever they were pretending was legal. 10 minutes. The band started playing. Another familiar hymn twisted into a PR tool. Every note made me want to set fire to something. I focused on the exits, the camera positions, the airspace above. No visible police yet. No federal vehicles. But I knew where they were coming from. The Presidio had 3 ways in and only 1 way out that didn't end in gridlock. And that route was now closed. Northcom teams always blocked escape before they made the entrance. Which meant Camille had about 9 minutes left before her carefully choreographed legacy got erased in real time. My phone vibrated once in my palm. 1 text. Unit staged. Confirm ID and initiate lockdown. I typed back. Target. Camille Rowe. Confirmed smuggling of restricted military-grade tech under nonprofit cover. Active at scene. Eli's voice cut in again. They're packing up. Keller just gave the go-ahead to pull the crates. That was it. The trigger. I gave the final authorization. Lock it down. The next 30 seconds felt like static quiet, like the air just before a thunderclap. Then I saw it. 2 unmarked black SUVs rolled in from the east lot, bumping over gravel like they didn't care who noticed. 4 men stepped out in suits that weren't regulation but definitely carried weight. Earpieces. No name tags. A moment later, the back gate burst open. 3 SEALs in nondescript tactical gear stormed the perimeter silently. 1 moved to the crates, 1 to the AV booth, and the 3rd directly toward the VIP tent. Everything slowed. Keller turned first, stiffening. Camille looked confused. She tried to speak, but the lead agent held up a photo and spoke 1 line I couldn't hear. She didn't get to argue. They surrounded her calmly, hands not even touching her yet, but she knew. She knew. She stood frozen, face like stone. I stepped into her view as they took the folder from her bag. One agent opened it, flipped through it, nodded. Another whispered something into a mic. 2 more officers arrived at the tent's other side, corralling Keller and the suits. The buyers tried to protest. Didn't matter. They were already out of time. Camilla's eyes met mine. She didn't speak, didn't plead, just stared, jaw clenched, calculating odds. But even she knew once Ghost Protocol is active, there's no press, no lawyers, no statements, just facts. And facts were all I ever needed. The camera flashes didn't start until after the vans were already gone. By the time the press realized something was happening, the team had extracted Camille, Keller, and the other 3 under sealed federal warrant. It was fast, cold, surgical. The same way Camille had run Valor House. Ghost Protocol didn't leave explanations. It didn't do press conferences. It just removed threats. Quietly, permanently. The next day, every major outlet ran with the headline: Valor House founder arrested in military tech laundering scandal. Camille Rose, healing empire, exposed as smuggling front. Camille's face was everywhere, once framed in compassion, now in shame. Former donors tripped over themselves to issue statements of shock and betrayal. Politicians who once praised her scrambled to distance themselves, but none of them had asked questions when it mattered. They just clapped politely and signed the checks. I returned to base on a Thursday. No fanfare. My commanding officer didn't say much, just handed me a sealed envelope. Inside was a chair, a metal table, and a major I didn't recognize. Lieutenant Commander Rowe, he began. You are hereby advised that your recent activation of Ghost Protocol, while legally justified, has triggered a review. The board has found no grounds for punitive action. However, in light of the public fallout, you are to be reassigned to non-operational duties effective immediately. Translation: you did the right thing, but you embarrassed the wrong people. Understood, sir, I said. He slid the envelope across the table. Inside was my new assignment. Exile wrapped in protocol. Paperwork. A desk job. They always find a way to say thank you with a slap. Eli picked me up an hour later. You regret it? He asked. Number. Even though it cost you everything? It didn't cost me everything. It cost me them. That's different. Dad's name was cleared. His rank reinstated posthumously. A small ceremony was held at Arlington. I stood there alone. They played taps again. It sounded colder the second time. A week later, I went back to Dad's house. The flag from his casket sat folded on the dining table. Camille hadn't asked for it. Maybe she'd known, deep down, that she hadn't earned the right to hold it. I found the journal he kept during his final deployment. On the second page, scribbled in faded ink, your name isn't something you earn, it's something you protect. He never said, be brave. He said, don't be lazy with your name. That stuck. I picked up the phone, not because I hated Camille, but because letting it go would mean letting rot win. She thought my uniform was a decoration, not a warning. She didn't understand that service isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just refusing to be part of the lie. That's what Ghost Protocol was for. Handle betrayal when it wears the same flag you do. And Camille? She wore it too well. I still wear the uniform, still show up every morning, still keep my boots clean. Because if I ever stop, I might start letting things slide. And letting things slide is how we got here. People don't ask much anymore. Some still blame me, said I could have handled it differently. But they didn't see Dad's real autopsy. They didn't read DeSantis's final notes. They weren't there. But I was. And I'll carry that not as a wound, but as weight. And honestly, that's fine. Some of us weren't built for the spotlight. We were built to carry. To hold the line when everyone else is busy taking pictures. There's no parade for doing the right thing too late for applause. No speech, just you, your name, and the silence that follows when no one's clapping but nothing inside you is rotting. That's enough. That's what honor feels like.